Hello, welcome to the Grove podcast. My name is Moz. I am not your host for this one, but I thought I'd add a quick piece before I hand over to my trusted partner, Tabs. This is an episode that I'm gutted I'm missing out on. It will all be revealed as to why, or you might be able to guess by the title. I'm really sorry to the listeners that it had to be Tabs that interviewed Elliot. I'm really sorry to Elliot that he had to listen to Tabs. And I'm really sorry to Tabs that I left him in the lurch to do it all on his own. Work gets in the way a lot recently, so that's my excuse. I just want to say thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you so much to Elliot at ArsenalVision as well for coming on. I'm hoping that we'll have guests like that of his calibre, of his ilk, as we have done in the past, more so in the future. Enough from me anyway. You're going to hear Tabs talking until the cows come home, so I'll leave it over and pass you over to him.
Hello and good evening. My name is Tabs, and welcome to episode 53 of the Grove podcast. Now, please excuse me if I come across a little nervous, as this is a big day in the history of the Grove podcast. We've only been going for 9 months or so. So I'm also without my wingman Moz, who again has unfortunately got in the way, so can't be here, which is a big shame for him and me. But I'll try and soldier on in his absence. So today, in this episode, we're doing another one in our series of meeting members of the Arsenal online community, meeting fans and getting to know all about them and their love for Arsenal. Now, we've been fortunate in the past to talk with some great Arsenal fans that you will have heard of, likes of Ask Cannon Picks, She Wore, North Banksy, and Guna Dave. And you can find those in our back catalogue. But today, I think we've hit the jackpot. I think we've hit the jackpot. I'm not sure he'll agree that himself, but I think so. Today we have another really, really special guest, someone who Moz and I both admire, someone who has actually inspired us to do what we're doing today. Sorry, podcast world, there's another podcast in the ether because of this man. Someone who, can speak even more than me. Look, you can block him on X at Yankee Gunner. A very special The Grove welcome to Elliot Smith, the founder and host of ArsenalVision podcast. Elliot, welcome.
Tabs,
how are you?
I have no ability to live up to the introduction, but I do appreciate it. I appreciate you asking me on. I think it is really fun to create something that people care about and then get a chance to talk to other people who are creating something that people are starting to care about, and even feel slightly like you influence someone to make the decision to go forward and do something like this. Because I think the more good conversations that are happening about Arsenal, the better everybody is, the better off we all are. We can find conversations that really scratch an itch for us, that build communities for us, that help us understand the game we all try to understand together. So there's nothing that I appreciate more than, even if in the tiniest of ways, I contributed to the idea to start recording those kind of conversations. So I can't thank you enough, and I'm thrilled to be here.
No, thank you, and we appreciate it. And look, for listeners, so Moz and I are fans of the ArsenalVision podcast, and we went to the Ali Pali at the end of last season, and we had a little chat with Elliot, and you're right, it was great fun, and Elliot was very welcoming and a nice chat with him, and then was very generous to say, look, let's have a chat if you want some advice on podcasts and all the rest of it. And I decided to cheekily ask him to come on board and do one of these community podcasts. So that's where this all stems from. So before we get to know Elliot, I just want to, hopefully we will get some new listeners out of this. Shameful plug. But before, just want to explain.
We'll do our best, Tabs. We'll do our best.
Yeah. I'm expecting a marketing campaign from ArsenalVision after this. So let's see. and there we go. So look, the Grove podcast is a podcast by your everyday Arsenal fans for your everyday Arsenal fans. We represent or are from a group of around 60 fans that actually formed from a Reddit substack or subgroup or whatever you wanted to call it, who we came together because we were like-minded fans who go to games, but we would go to games on our own. And so someone said, hey, who wants to meet up? And we did. And then from that, we started this podcast. We're on social media. We travel to away games. Like we were in Milan the other day. There was 10 of us. We do a little match day program before every home game. And then we have a WhatsApp chat group, which is here, there, and everywhere. And now we're just really good friends. But I think we've gone beyond that. As I say, with the podcast, we're online, we try to create this community. So yeah, look, if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can always meet us at the Horatia pub near Holloway Road. You can, we're on Threads, etc., etc. So it's really good, and we just love being Arsenal friends and family. So, and I think that very much touches on what you like, Elliot, because you always talk about community. You always share that thing. You always think that what you love about what you do is the community. And now I know the Discord can get a bit rough and ready at times, but beyond that, you love that.
Yep.
But so tell me about that community thing. How, what is it that you love about that? Why is that an inspiration for you to continue doing what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think it depends on where you come from, but there are a lot of people that maybe take for granted having an Arsenal community of their own, um, by virtue of being, maybe close to the club geographically or in an area that's more densely populated with Arsenal supporters, and it's just easier to find other Arsenal supporters, growing up with them in your school, becoming best friends, going to games together, whatever the case may be. And obviously I'm an American, as you may be able to tell from the accent, and I, you know, I started to fall in love with Arsenal because I was working overseas in London quite frequently and got to see some games there, at pubs and out with people, and the energy and the enthusiasm for it was infectious, sort of different from the sports culture in America, which I was very plugged into. And, this goes back to 97, 98, 99, that time frame, a very good time frame to start getting interested in Arsenal. But the thing that was so hard is I'd go over there and I'd be in these packed pubs, or I'd be with people that really cared and had this intense passion for it. And then I'd come home and I'd do my best to just hold on to whatever drips of that passion I could find, right? Trying to watch the one game that might be on in 2 or 3 months. I mean, this goes back before you really had internet coverage, before there were streams or anything like that. And so it was Arsenal, but it was Arsenal without the community. And the thing that attracted to me in the first place was the intensity of the passion and the way people came together, and the songs, right, and the rivalries, and the tribalism. And so over time, even though more of the games were on TV, even though there were more places springing up around the States where you could go be with other Arsenal supporters to watch games, I really just had a longing to feel the thing that I initially felt the first times I saw Arsenal games over in London. And so I started blogging, then I started podcasting. And as I started podcasting, what I realized was really changing for me is it was bringing me into communication and into connection with people that felt strongly about Arsenal, that wanted to have a chat, that wanted to get together, that wanted to be together in a digital space in a way that they couldn't necessarily be together in a physical space. And as it grew, even for some people that were match going fans that could be in a physical space, they started to find that there was something we were doing in a way we were talking about the game, and talking about our love for Arsenal, that felt like kindred spirits. And so ultimately, I think the podcast sprang out of a long time effort to recreate the sensation that first made me fall in love with football and fall in love with Arsenal. And now here I am years later. And I think that's happened for me. I think that my life is fuller, richer, more connected, more rewarding because of the community of people around the podcast, which is kind of precisely the thing that I would have hoped I would have from loving this club way back in 1997, 98, 99, that kind of time frame.
No, that's a great, and we really resonate with that. I mean, I've been supporting Arsenal, since the late 70s, early 80s. But we've got our community. We've got people who come down from Scotland, from all over the UK, but we've got people in Canada, in the States, people who are going back to Australia. And you're right, and that thing about watching the game on your own, and no one to share that experience with. It's like traveling on your own. If there isn't anyone to share it with, it's not as good. So it's nice. So we try and offer. Not everyone can go to the game, but then, God, you can imagine the group chat during games. If people are there, then we want to hear about the atmosphere, and then everyone's chatting. So it is. And then actually, I lean on it in the ground, going, is it a penalty? Is he offside? So it's a really helpful, fun thing. But I resonate with that thing, because also I used to live and work abroad at some period, and I would be getting up at godly hours to watch the game, without any volume. But that would be just me on my own, and it was like, okay, win, lose or draw. Oh, that was nice, and then you go back to work or whatever like that. So yeah, I think having that community really helps. So you made it sound. So you said, oh, you started podcasting, you and blogging. You made it sound so easy. I mean, what was it like at the time? Were there other podcasts, other blogs? Where did that passion for communication come from?
I think like anyone, there's someone that inspires you, like any activity. There's someone that usually inspires you or encourages you to try to do something. And so the way I stayed connected to Arsenal from a distance in the early 2000s, when it still wasn't something I could easily stay connected to, was Arsblog, reading Arsblog. So reading Arsblog made reading a blog about Arsenal a daily part of my life. And as someone that just likes to write and likes to talk and likes to be creative, I wanted to participate in that activity because it seemed so rewarding for him and I so enjoyed what he did. So I started doing that. Um, I had the opportunity as a result of that to get asked on podcasts, and I was a podcast listener, and of course, an Arscast listener as well, including the Arscast, which was great. And I can remember being asked to come on the Arscast, and for about the first 5 minutes, I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. So it's just funny how things change over time. But I think then going on podcasts made me realize that that was something that I really enjoyed doing. And at the time, so I had been an attorney once upon a time, a long time ago, but I'd quit that and gone off to chase my passions of being a musician. And I hosted some TV shows and I was on live TV quite a bit. And so being in a sort of extemporaneous speaking role was something I was very comfortable with professionally. And to do that, but to do it associated with Arsenal, I mean, what could be better, right? So it felt like a very natural thing to just do as a result of what I was already kind of doing professionally and because of the people I admired and I looked up to, like Andrew.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just funny enough. It was because of Arsblog and his now Andrew's podcast and all the rest of it that I heard Clive, on there, and everyone loves Clive. Yeah, So that's what I was going to put in the introduction. Have I hit the jackpot, or can I go one higher? But
you got to shoot for Clive.
I know. We'll talk about that afterwards. Anyway, so actually, I came to ArsenalVision because of Arsblog and Arscast. Yeah, sorry, the Arscast, and so yeah, I can see that connection there. And it was funny when you said about the music and the TV personality, because there's a couple of things. One, I looked up Elliot Smith. And there's a grunge guitarist, which I said, no, hang on, I had to double check. Is that you? Is that no?
He met with a terrible ending. Whenever people tell me, "Oh, are you that guy?" I'm like, I think you want to Google what happened to that guy, because no, I'm not that guy. He stabbed himself in the heart, unfortunately.
Ouch. So, okay. Yeah. Ouch. Okay.
Bad way to
so
go.
Moving
Great
on swiftly,
music,
but
though.
yeah, but moving on swiftly, but I did I found some articles on the Athletic from 2019, and it said Elliot Smith is a contributor to Athletic Soccer as well as an obscure TV personality. and now that makes sense in terms of the obscure TV personality. So not my words, the words of the Athletic.
Actually, those are my words. I wrote them. Oh, there you go. It's totally okay.
Yeah. All right. So well, you are very self-deprecating, so that it doesn't surprise me. So I mean the ArsenalVision podcast is grown massively, and I said lots and lots of listeners, and something that we can only aspire to have a minuscule piece of that market. But how did what is so good about it is the team that you have, and the diversity of voices to an extent. As in, I know you've got how should we say, an ethos or an approach, but even within that, it's reasoned. It's not, I say, overly reactionary. It's not controversial. You're not looking for clicks. It's thoughtful but provocative at the same time. So tell me, how did you decide upon who you were going to be, and then how did you get that crew together? Like, you got Clive, Tim, Poz, Scott. Unfortunately, I can't remember Giant Gooner's name,
Matt,
but Matt. That's it. Sorry, Matt. Yeah, Matt. How did that group come together, and how did you decide who you were going to be?
This is how you know you're doing something right. If you're doing something right, your community is made up of people that you admire and you would want to participate in the activities they're engaged in, right? Like when you really get it right, your community reflects your values and your qualities. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there's probably thousands of people in our community, any of whom could have come on and been a part of the podcast and been a great addition to the podcast. Because when I talk to the people in the community, whether it's in Discord or at live events or we come together, you wind up talking to a lot of people who are excellent analysts of the game, who are excellent at communicating their ideas, articulate, successful people. I think one of the things that made it a little different is, in the content creation world, right? There are people who get into it with the goal of making a living as a content creator, right? And as a result, from day one, what they're really chasing isn't quality or community. They're chasing success and compensation. Now, I don't want to look down my nose at anybody like that, because you got to make a living. And if you think you can make a living making content, then God bless you. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, and most people who set out to do it will fail. But I think when you start out with that as your North Star, you are inevitably going to start to get guided into what gets clicks, what gets attention, what goes viral. And so that's a good hack for growth, but it's maybe not the best approach for developing a consistent, committed group of people that want to stay with you and be a part of what you're creating. And so because we took that approach from the start, you have people like Clive and Tim and Paul, who are all adults, successful in their own career paths, all from very different approaches, right? Clive going to games since before Tim was born, Tim going to every single game home and away for 20 plus years. Paul, an Irishman in America who, is involved in Eastern philosophy, and just brings a sort of worldly and unique global perspective. But the thing we all had in common is none of us were doing it with the hope that it would be self-supporting. We did it because we enjoyed chatting with one another. And as each individual person heard more of the pod, they thought that's a conversation I'd like to be involved in. And so the best recruitment tool for creating the perfect group of people to talk to was simply having a good conversation, recording it, publishing it, and letting other good people say, I want to get in on that conversation. And I realized that that's not the reality for a lot of people. There are people that set out to do this with the goal being, I'm going to support myself being a content creator. I mean, that takes tremendous courage. It is a huge risk. You're probably going to have a lot of ups and downs, a lot more downs than ups. And if you're able to do it, then who am I to criticize? But I definitely think that the incentives, if that's what you set out to do, are going to lead you to make a very different type of content than if your incentive is just have a good conversation and see where it goes from there. So it's a long-winded way of saying that I think if you are a good person who has interesting things to say about Arsenal and you're willing to have that conversation with no expectation of any other success than that, that can be a really good starting point. There's no guarantee where it goes from there, but it's been a successful approach for us.
No, that sounds good, and in a way, that's sort of what we're endeavouring to do. Is just it's some fun. We're just chatting, having a bit of fun. Let's see if we, and that's what it's all about. I know I like that because I think that's what it should be about. Just enjoying yourself, having a good conversation, trying to connect with other people, and see where it goes, and say trying to offer sort of a certain perspective and try and do something. It is a bit of a saturated market. I think we all know, but we're trying to sort of, with things like this, try and do something different and open people up to different people that they may not hear from and all the rest of it. So no, I really like that. So is that why you think it is such a massive success? It is, I would say, is the pinnacle of Arsenal fan media. Proper Arsenal fan media. Say yourself and Arscast. On a par. Is that what you attribute the success to, that philosophy and that approach?
Well, so I'd marry that to one other thing. The first part, yes, is I think me as sort of the host and person who put it together and sort of runs the sort of functional part of it, just having the goal of being welcoming, creating something positive and putting it into the world. It wouldn't work if Paul and Tim and Clive weren't so insightful and articulate and intelligent in the way they communicated about Arsenal, right? So, I try to bring a little levity. I'll occasionally give my opinion, of course. Can't be denied that. And I'm going to respond to every email. I'm going to respond to every DM that I see. I'm going to respond to everybody who gets in touch. I'm going to try to say hi to everybody in person if I can, because there's not a single person connected to this thing that I don't appreciate and feel fortunate to have as part of this group. But at the end of the day, people are listening or don't listen, watch or don't watch because it's good. And it's good because Tim and Paul and Clive are intelligent and articulate and say things that are not just interesting, but entertaining. And they've found the right blend of that. So yeah, the sort of concept of community and the ideals behind which it was founded, I'm making it sound like it's a country or something. Yeah, the ideas behind which we started this podcast are great and all that, but it also only works if there's talent, and they're very talented. So that is definitely a part of it.
No, I agree, and that sort of leads me on to my other, sort of this question. I was like thinking, well, it seems like you do the admin around it, shall we say, and you put it together, yeah, and you support it, and the rest of it. I was just like saying, is it a full-time job for you? Is this it, or do you have any other interest? Yeah, so getting to know you outside of Arsenal, ArsenalVision podcast, is this what you do full-time? Because given the number of podcasts that I see, the number of tweets and everything else, it would be very hard to do it on top of something else. And do you have other interests, hobbies? You say, you're out in the States. Do you follow other sports and things like that?
Yeah, and by the way, I'm going to answer this for sure, but I also want to say I am not traditionally this navel gazing. I am certainly not usually.
Oh,
I don't sniff my farts this much usually. So I just want to say, like, I'm doing this because you're asking, but I didn't come on and say I'll only come on if you let me talk about myself for an hour. So I
no,
just so we're clear,
I'm
people want
asking
to know.
I'm asking the questions that I'm interested. I like to get to know people. I feel like as I said, this is the sort of the thing that we're trying to do with this pod. Is if we're in the pub having a chat and just getting to know you, and I'm sure lots of people hear you all the time about Arsenal, but don't really know who you are, sort of
Fair
thing.
enough. Look, if this
Yeah.
winds up being an elaborate online dating scheme, my wife is going to hate me. So let's just make sure we keep it
Well,
platonic. But yes, so in terms of life, so I was very entrepreneurial before this.
mm,
I mentioned I'd been an attorney, but I did
mm,
stop doing that, and then through swings and roundabouts, wound up starting some companies, doing some entrepreneurial stuff. After I exited my primary company, I had some time where I was doing the pod just by itself. I did get a job offer about 2 years ago that I candidly think stupidly I took it because I thought, oh, I've got time to do both, and this will be an interesting offer. And I thought it was interesting. So technically, I have a 9 to 5. You know, I have a job. Um, Being in the United States, also, like, if you might say, well, if you could have supported yourself with the pod, why not do that? Like, there are some complexities here, like healthcare and things like that, which are
mm,
dependent on full employment versus having to try to secure it yourself when you're an entrepreneur. And so
mm,
there were things about having the job that I think would have been appealing to me. Plus, we had our second daughter. She was very young. My wife wanted to leave the workforce because we were just really struggling to make it work schedules wise with two daughters. And so my wife's had the chance to become a stay at home mom, and it's been incredible seeing the difference it makes for our daughters. So we're really blessed in that respect, and like I feel really fortunate.
mm,
What I will say is the podcast is one of the most important things in my life. And as silly as that may sound, and I can understand why you'd be like, oh, the
mm,
podcast is one of the here's why it's serious. As a man in my 40s, and I think anybody of this age or around this age or older can understand, as you get older, some of the dreams you had, some of the things you thought might happen in life, some of the visions you had of where you wanted to go in life, doors feel like they're closing. And you start to feel more and more like who you are now is who you'll always be and what you'll always do. And I was definitely getting to that place in my late 30s of, I'm going to be a dad now. I'm going to do this thing that I do. It's what I'm always going to do. And each day is going to be the same. And I'm on this path. The podcast gave me a totally different life than I expected I would have. Traveling to see people I never thought I'd meet, going to see Arsenal play football and meet new friends and make new relationships and go on stage at Alley Pally or Union Chapel. Like, my life has been transformed. And as a parent, what that models to my daughters about following dreams and doing things you care about, I cannot overstate how fortunate I feel that my life has veered off into this totally unexpected path. And I think it's a reminder to me that you never say the doors are closed or the paths are shut. But as a result, and as I've already said, the people who care about this thing mean the world to me. Like, they're like family. So the idea that I would ever do anything to jeopardize or threaten this is a non-starter for me. Taking the job has definitely forced me to split my time in a way where every day I wake up and say, am I giving enough of myself to the podcast and the podcast community for people to not feel like it's not getting its attention? I think I balance that well, but I can definitely feel the candle burning at both ends. So I think at some point I'm going to have to make that decision about,
mm.
prioritizing the thing that really gives me this sense of fulfillment and reward.
No, that's really nice to hear, and yeah, and it makes sense, and yeah, yeah, and it's funny, like, because who would have thought I'd listened to you now for how many years, and as you say, who knows what will happen?
Yeah.
This time last year, well, this time a year and a half ago, there wasn't this group called the Grove, and all of a sudden we're a group of how many friends, and all of a sudden we've got a podcast, and
It's awesome,
yeah, so
isn't it?
who know? I know it is great, and I think the thing I've learned from this thing, and I've told my kids, because I said, and I told my wife, if you don't ask, you don't get. You've always got no. So hey, take a
Hmm.
chance, see what happens, and again, so and that's why you're here, and that's why I'm talking to you today, because you take a chance on something you never know. Well, look, okay, so we've got to know you a bit better, and done a bit of navel gazing and understood about ArsenalVision, which is great. So this is the sort of thing I love, but we now want to hear about your love for Arsenal and so on. So in the next section of this, like you said that you were working in London, and Arsenal absorbed you, and you absorbed Arsenal, and things like that. So what can you remember? What the first game that you watched that hooked you?
Yeah. So 98 FA Cup final, Arsenal Newcastle. I was over for work, and someone said, "You got to come watch this game." Not live, obviously, just down the pub to watch it.
Yeah.
Didn't just take some diehards ticket for. Wouldn't that be a great origin story? I was just the plastic foreign fan at Wembley using up an Arsenal ticket. No, went down to a pub, like it was rammed, and the passion, everybody was crazy. It was so much fun, and I was like, I need more. This is what I need. I could tell even at a young age then. I mean, I want this, right? And I think for young men, football is so compelling, right? Because at that time when all the synapses are firing and all the things in life are happening around you and you don't know what's going to happen. There's something about the passion and the excitement of football. I shouldn't say, by the way, young men, young people, young men and women, obviously. It just connects to you, that sense of belonging. So I loved it. And I knew I was going to be hooked from then, but boy, was it a tough, let's say like 6 or 7 years trying to stay connected to it. And that's where things like Arsblog helped. There would be so few Arsenal games I could watch. It sounds dumb. I'm sure it sounds dumb to anyone listening, but playing with Arsenal on FIFA, on Xbox, right? It helped because I knew the ratings for every player they had. Every year the new game came out, I'm like, who did they get and who's new on the team? And like, some of those teams were fun to play with, by the way. So like, you could beat down some kids on FIFA with some of those lineups. So yeah, it was a tough first few years to stay connected to the team. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Well, you sound like you were committed, and you wanted to make sure you were committed. So, and so okay, so that was your first game watching on television, and they got you hooked. What was the actual first game you managed to go to live?
Gosh, that's a really tough question. You would think that would just be something I know.
Well, that's why I sent you the questions in advance.
I know, I know. That's a fair point. You've outed me there. I think so. This may sound crazy because I was an Arsenal fan for a long time, but obviously. Work and expense and the difficulty of understanding even how to get tickets for a long time was an obstacle. I had a couple of trips planned over to go see the game that didn't work out. I think the first game I actually saw was Arsenal Leicester under Unai Emery, Lacazette late own goal / equalizer.
Yeah.
I think that's the first game I actually made it over to. And I had been obviously intending to go before that. You had the COVID years, made that hard. Since then, obviously, I've been over quite a bit.
Yeah.
But, as anybody who's an Arsenal supporter will tell you, the hard thing is, can you get a ticket? And so now I've had some people that have been kind enough to offer me some. So I've made the point to get over there. But yeah, I think that's the first one. I think it was, I don't think I'm wrong. If I am, I'll correct the record later. But I think it's
Crystal Palace. Was it Leicester or Crystal Palace? You got the
Palace. Was it
Crystal
Palace?
I think it was Palace where he got the equalizer deflect.
It was like the deflected.
Yeah,
because we
2-2 or something. I think it was Palace.
Yeah, we took the lead. Then we played like crap. We conceded tons of possession, and we did score the late goal. Which
was it? No, Wolves.
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 I don't
it was
think
the one
it was Wolves.
Oh, okay. Well, I think someone can tell us. Anyway,
yeah,
maybe it's Midlands Cup. I can't remember. We can find out. But maybe it was Wolves.
Oh, was it Southampton?
No, it wasn't Southampton. Because I was there at that game, and I'm thinking Palace or I'm thinking Wolves. I'm not thinking Leicester. So
yeah, I will check that because I'm sure I have something.
Okay. So, okay. But this may be ironic question. What is your best Arsenal memory? What is your
So I mean, look, obviously there are some good ones for there are some good ones for a variety of different reasons. So one of my good friends through the Arsenal world is this guy Tim Clark, Ars to Mouse. That was one of the first podcasts I was on. We met online. We became fast friends. But the first time we ever met, he's a Londoner and a season ticket holder who moved out to San Francisco for work. So we went out. I went out to San Francisco to meet him. We went to a baseball game. We walked around. We had drinks. We had just the best time. And like someone you meet online for the first time, you never know how it's going to be. But he was like, we were fast friends. And that was for the Wigan FA Cup semifinal, which is one of the worst games you've ever seen in your life.
I was there. I was there with my son. That was the one that ended with penalties, wasn't it?
Penalties. Yeah. Was it a Per Mertesacker equalizer? I want to say.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Coming back from not knowing my first Emirates game, but
it was Palace, by the way. Palace.
It was Palace. Yeah. Good memory. And I mean, there's a funny thing. The funny thing, just from our pod, Tim Stillman will be like, oh yeah, that goal that Ljungberg headed in the 03-04 season in the 72nd minute again. He knows all that stuff. I never remember. I have a shit memory for memories, but so that's one of them. I don't know if it would count as an Arsenal memory, but doing the Union Chapel show 2 years ago when Ian Wright joined us for the show and the roar of Ian Wright coming on stage. Now I know what it must be like to be a footballer, because that roar, even in Union Chapel, is one of the loudest sounds I've ever heard. Maybe the best one, though, I was over for the Bournemouth game with the Reece Nelson winner, and I was with Clive, and like I think my rib cage was going to break the way we were holding each other. And then I tried to buy rounds of shots for everybody at
Yes, I remember the story
the Tollington
and the bill that your
and the
wife saw.
the credit card got declined because my wife thought it was fraudulent charge back home in the States. But that was obviously an incredible moment, because I think it's also a moment where you had that sense of, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, isn't it? It's destiny, it's fate. It didn't wind up being either of those things. But so those would be three: the meeting Tim and celebrating the Wigan FA Cup semifinal that went on to be the season we broke the trophy drought, right? The Ian Wright coming on stage at the Union Chapel, or the Bournemouth game. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's cool. That's good. And I share a lot of those memories. Unfortunately, I didn't make the Union Chapel that year, but the other two, I was there. And to counter that, what's your worst Arsenal memory?
Worst Arsenal memory is difficult, because I'm inclined to sort of think about recent moments, right? But I think that overstates recency. I think for me, so thankfully, I haven't been to a game that was like soul destroying, crushing, terrible game. And I'm going to the Forest game, so hopefully my record of not going to soul destroyingly terrible games will remain. But I was at the Porto game away. That was a terrible game, but it was a great experience. I think anytime you get to go when you're me and live as far away as you do, it's not going to rate as a bad experience because you're with good people. But I think the Wayne Bridge goal might be it. I know it would be easier to say Paris. And maybe Paris is the right answer. But the Wayne Bridge goal, I'm convinced we would have won the Champions League that season. And I also think, had we won the Champions League that season, there's every chance we stopped the Jose Mourinho myth from ever being born, because I think that's the season he won it with Porto. So that was a really, really hard moment. And to that club, that terrible club with that team, it's pretty hard to forgive, you know?
Yeah. No, thank you for that.
Sorry, you asked.
Listeners of the pod will know my love for Chelsea and that clown car of a club and everything. I despise them. And anyway, let's swiftly move on. But yeah, that's a gut wrencher, and I think you're right. It is worse than Paris. You're there in the final, etc., etc. Having Chelsea at home do that. Anyway, quickly moving on.
The final, we're against Barcelona, the famous Barcelona, and we get sent down to 10 men. And yes, it was we could have won it. I can live with losing the final to Barcelona, even though it hurt. Losing to Chelsea in that season in that way, no.
Totally agree. So let's look at some nicer things then. So who's your favourite Arsenal player currently, and why?
Currently, gosh, for a little while there, it was trending to maybe be Gabriel Martinelli. I had a soft spot for him. I think, honestly, it's just come around to being Bukayo Saka. It's hard for it not to be. Like, he's one of ours. He's so fantastic. He's been through a lot. He's dragged himself back. I mean, he's turned into a player. I always thought he'd be good. I don't think I thought he'd be this good this soon in the way he has. And the just transformation to taking all of this pressure on his shoulders and the way he represents the club. I love him. It's just impossible not to love him. And, I could pick players like Saliba, who I just adore, or, obviously love Odegaard, Martinelli. It's an evolving situation, but it's got to be Saka. It's just become Saka. And the funny thing is, it just shows you what a powerhouse he is, because I always liked him, but I might have been able to put a few players ahead of him as my favorite of the moment. And he's just pushed them aside. He's become the guy.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny because always listening to the podcast, you're always struggling with stock rising because do we have to give it to him again, or his level's so high? It's a good choice. I think we do take him for granted for a little bit. So I'm really lucky in the stadium. I'm on the sort of corner flag in North Bank, and he's second half, he's always running in front of me, so I've got such a beautiful view of seeing him every game. And yeah, he's fantastic, and yeah, you can't not like him. But thinking about your whole Arsenal supporting career, who's your favourite Arsenal player of all time since you've been supporting, and why?
So for a long time, I think I tried to answer this question and be unique. But like, then I grew up and I'm like, I can just be honest with people. It's Thierry Henry. It's cliche. It's easy. It's bandwagon. I don't. Thierry Henry is the best footballer I've ever seen play football. Who's not named Lionel Messi? I wouldn't take Ronaldo over him. I wouldn't take Ronaldinho over him. I wouldn't take R9 over him. He, of all the players, of all the top scorers in Premier League history, he's like lapped the field in assists as well. He had a season with 20 assists, not to mention, right, being one of the all-time great goal scorers. He Sometimes you see a player who's so quick that their pace destroys a team. And sometimes you see a player whose touch is so good and technique is so good he destroys a team. He's a dribbler. Sometimes you see immense finishers. I mean, we talk about Phil Foden like he's some elite finisher from outside the box. If Phil Foden never scores one goal from outside the box of the caliber of the goals that Thierry Henry scored from outside the box, he'll have had a great career. Like, Henry was all of them. He could dribble you. He could do keepy uppies around you. He was stronger than you. He was quicker than you. He was more arrogant, and he was a showman. He had that showmanship, but not in the showmanship way of like an Antony who will do like step overs and twirl around and then lose the ball out in a touch. You know, he was a showman, but the show was a success. Like some of the things he thought to do, if a player right now tried to do it, would be like, that's selfish. Why are you trying? Like the goal at Old Trafford, flick it up, spin around and hit it. You know, if a player did that now, they'd hit it in a rosette and the commentators would be saying, oh, it's selfish. He had other players near him. But with Henry, it was all possible. You know, he could do any of it. So Bergkamp's a great answer, and Vieira's obviously a great answer. And I could even go into my bag. I mean, the player that I maybe felt the most affection for, not my favorite player, but the one I felt the most affection for was Cesc Fabregas. Because Fabregas came into the team at the time when I could really see the games, when I could really watch, when I was starting to blog and podcast, when that was starting to be an everyday part of my life. And so I was obsessed with Arsenal in a way I hadn't been able to be previously. And he felt like one of us. I know he wasn't an academy kid per se, but such a young age. He was Arsen's son, right? He felt like that God's chess piece. And he was brilliant. He was so good in a way that our other teams hadn't been, a different kind of brilliant from the pace and power of the prior generation. And so obviously the way it ended wasn't great. But so I think I enjoyed Thierry Henry more than anyone else, but I think maybe from an affection standpoint, I had a little more affection for Cesc.
Yeah, no, I guess it's similar to Saka, that affection for a young guy coming through the ranks and doing that. And it's interesting, the word I had in my head, and before you said it, was arrogant with Thierry Henry, and I don't mean it in a negative way. And I think it's akin to, I think, American sports. But I watch a lot of NFL, a bit of basketball. They have that confidence, and they're not shy in showing. And they'll show it, and then they'll execute. So they're not shy. They know they're good. They'll tell you they're good, and then they'll show you you're good. And that was Thierry. That sort of
he could put his money where his mouth was. You know what I mean? Like, it's not arrogance if it's true. You know?
Yeah. No, it's just, that's who I am.
But
that's
right,
what I do.
That stardom, that knowledge that he was a star, that arrogance made it easy to like him, but harder to love him in a way. Whereas like Cesc was just a kid with bad hair, scoring at Juve and right. Like, I mean, that was easy to fall in love with for me.
No, absolutely. Okay, so we got just a few minutes left, so we'll just close out looking at the current state of affairs, the current team. So how do you, for those that don't listen to the Arsenal Vision podcast, maybe you get a few new listeners out of this. We'll see.
I would take anyone I get.
Oh, no, absolutely. How do you feel about the current Arsenal team, and what are your thoughts on the season so far, and what's going to come in the future?
I am simultaneously extremely frustrated with the situation we find ourselves in, and at the same time unrelenting in my belief that this is still the best team in the league. I think people have massively underweighted circumstance as an explanation for things. I think when you take a great team and make them play 3 games down to 10 men and 6 of the hardest away fixtures of the season in the first 11 fixtures of the season, and make them play the current top of the table team for almost half the game with a back four that would be lucky to survive in League One, let alone the Premier League, that you're not going to be at your best. And when you are chopping and changing constantly, you are not going to be at your best. When a Mikel Merino comes to the team and before he can bed in, he's broken his shoulder and he's out for 2 months. When the player of the season from last season is out for 2.5 months. When you sign a left back whose job is not just to be a left back, but to add an injection of something different to your attack, and that player is out. I think the chopping and changing makes it difficult. And then you add into that the international tournament in the summer that played these players into the ground. And it's a recipe for a very difficult season. And, the irony is Spurs away, Villa away, Newcastle away, City away, Chelsea away. We have more points this season from those fixtures than last season, but it's because they're all clustered where they were. Do I think we beat Bournemouth with 10 men, 11 men? I do. Do I think we beat Brighton with 11 men? I do. And if VAR doesn't tell a ref who gave a yellow to go to the screen and check and send Saliba off, not only do I think that's 3 points instead of 1, I think instead of 0, I think it's 3 points instead of 1 against Liverpool because Saliba's there. And when we lose Gabriel, we're not playing Miles Lewis-Skelly, Kivior, White, and Partey as a back four, against Salah and Darwin Nunez. So the problem is everybody calls it excuses. Sometimes they're not excuses or explanations, right? So now people say, oh, but it's 9 points. You can't recover 9 points. Match week 20 of last season, we were 5 points behind Liverpool. By match week 37, 17 games later, we were 7 points ahead of Liverpool. That is 12 points in 17 games. Is it going to happen again? It sure might not. It really might not. But until they've been tested in the way we have with some hard fixtures and a few injuries and some red cards, until that happens, I don't want to hear it. Because everybody's willing to say, oh, well, City, they were playing with a guy whose name I don't know if I can say, in the back four, Pussy.
I don't know. I try not to pay too much attention to City.
They don't have Rodri, they don't have De Bruyne. Oh, it's all the excuses possible. Well, the same should be true for us. And so I still look at, we beat PSG, we beat Villa away, we beat Spurs away. We were bad against Newcastle, I give you that. But I just rewatched the Chelsea game. And you know what? I saw the Arsenal I recognize. And we're now going to have a Merino who can start to bet in. And we're going to get back Calafiori. And Odegaard is back. And if we find fitness and don't get screwed by the referees, he says, laughing, then will we go on another 17-1-1 kind of run? We may not. But I have no reason to believe we're not the team that can do that. So until I see this team fit and at 11 men, solidly outplayed by someone, I still believe we can turn around. So no, I am not happy with where we sit points wise, but I am undeterred in my belief that there is still a very good Arsenal in there that we are going to see more consistently.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And some of those points were the ones I was making in the previous podcast and on our group chat, for me, if people think it's over now, fine, let them. That's how they want to support it, and
of course,
everyone
totally
can
fair.
and all the rest of it. I would find it hard to keep going every week and be happy if that was my thought process. I've got to believe. I've got to have a level of hopium, shall we
Can
say?
I say something to Tabs about that? So 2 things. One, I think you have to believe what you believe, right? You got to be. The thing that you shouldn't be is dishonest. If you honestly believe it's over, you shouldn't go saying you believe it's not over. Like, if we were 9 points behind City right now, I might think it is over, to be fair. But this is a different team we're chasing, and I don't know that I believe in them to run away with it yet. But the other thing I would just say, you can believe that we are better than what we've shown and we've been unfortunate, and also have some concerns about the summer business we did and whether we left ourselves too thin in certain areas. So I don't want anyone to hear what I'm saying and think you're avoiding all the things that we did wrong and just saying the things we did right. I can see clearly that maybe some of the players we let go, we didn't replace. I said in September when the window closed, Martin Odegaard looks like a clear single point of failure. And sure enough, that's what he became. And it was almost perfect in its irony that after the window closes and we leave ourselves short in one position, that's the position we lose. So I don't think saying I think we're still good is the same as saying we've done everything right, because I don't think we have, but I do think we're still good.
Yeah, no, I agree. So look, That's great, and that's a really nice spot to finish. So we're just going to close out to say, look, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy, and as I said, with everything that you do, so I appreciate you taking the time to come onto our little lowly podcast. Really appreciate it, and love to hear what you were saying. You can follow, or as you like to say, block Elliot at Yankee Gunner. You can find Arsenal Vision podcast on all your podcasting apps. I recommend have a listen once you've listened to The Grove. Obviously,
of course, yes.
you might enjoy it. Again, for those new to the Grove podcast, we do previews and reviews of games, but and also during the international breaks, we've tried to sort of do this community cast where I say we've spoken to Ask Helen Picks, She War, North Banksy, and then Guna Dave recently, which was actually a really interesting podcast about his new book, an Arsenal anthology with poems. And he actually got quite emotional actually at one point because the background as to why he wrote it or some of the poems is really worth a listen. I think that one. If you want a dose of hopium, you can listen back to the last 5 minutes, or you can listen to our Chelsea podcast where we guaranteed that we'll win the league this season. And if you want a bit more of this, of my chat, of Mars, whatever, you can follow us mainly on Threads. We don't really do X, at The Grove AFC. We may do something during the international break, a Q&A. We're not too sure, depending on availability. If not, we'll be back before the Forest game. And I can't wait. And I said this in the previous one, I got a huge sense of love for the team, and I think where we might go and what's possible, irrespective of what's gone in the past. And I cannot wait for I can't wait for the Forest game. I'm so excited for it. So that leaves me to say thank you, Elliot, again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. It was my pleasure. Have me back, please.
Absolutely, and there we go. So thank you very much again, and ciao.